This is Mindset for Success with your host, Dr. Leslie Knudsen. Each week, she will interview women entrepreneurs to explore the unconscious psychological struggles they faced as they build their businesses and how they overcame them. Here's your host, Leslie Knudsen.
Jamie, welcome. I'm so excited to have you as a guest today.
I am excited to be here. Thank you.
There's so much to say about you, I kind of don't know where to begin, but Jamie Lieberman is an attorney, podcaster, and entrepreneur dedicated to making legal accessible and sharing the message that working within a lawyer doesn't have to be scary. As the owner and founder of #Legal, Jamie draws on her experience working with influencer marketing professionals, creatives, and business owners to help her clients grow and protect their business. She leads an all-female virtual team, and Jamie is the co-host for the Fearless Business podcast. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Jamie, as you know, it takes a lot to be a successful female entrepreneur. And while business acumen is really, really important, we rarely talk about the psychological challenges that women often face to achieve that success. So today, I'd like us to kind of focus on some of those negative and sometimes persistent thoughts that create doubt, undermine success, and can destroy self-confidence, risk-taking, and even decision-making, not to mention the happiness and satisfaction in our lives. Can I have you start with telling us a little bit about your busy and full journey to become an entrepreneur? Tell us about this journey and what pushed you to become the entrepreneur when you did.
Gosh, it is a long journey. I would agree. I will keep it as short as I can with just some of the important points, but it did not happen overnight, that's for sure. I actually started my career completely separate from being an attorney. I worked for a publishing company and a number of .coms, which instantly ages me because people don't call them that anymore. And then in 2001, the .com crash happened, and shortly after that, 9/11 happened. I was living in New York and working in New York, and everything I sort of knew had changed. And so it was at that moment, after having worked for 5 years after college, I decided it was time to go back to school. In doing so, I thought I was going to get my MBA because my background was engineering and business. And when I went to look at the MBA programs in New York at NYU and Columbia, they didn't feel like a fit to me. And so on a whim, which is not something I would ever recommend to anybody, I took the LSAT. I happen to be pretty good at taking standardized tests. And from the LSAT, I actually got a whole bunch of scholarship opportunities to go to law school. So I ended up choosing Seton Hall Law School because they were gracious enough to offer me a full scholarship. And off I went. And it was probably one of the scariest but most incredible decisions I had made, because I was on my own. I lived on my own. I did not have, I didn't move back in with my parents like a lot of young law school students do. So I had to support myself. And I went through law school, and I left law school loving it, being so happy. And then I started practicing. And I quickly realized, yes. I quickly realized the practice of law was very different than what I had thought it was in my head. But I muddled through because I knew of the importance of getting that experience. And about 7 or 8 years after I had begun my practice, I ended up leaving and deciding it was time for me to pursue something else. I did not know what that looked like, but so I just started to freelance, and I freelanced working for other lawyers, and I picked up jobs. I mean, I pretty much picked up any job you can think of, legal or not legal, to just kind of try to find myself. And I eventually ended up working with a group of bloggers, because I myself had been a blogger many, many years ago, before the word influencer had existed. And they asked me if I would give a talk about legal issues for bloggers. And I thought, that's interesting. And remember, this was about 7 or 8 years ago. So nobody was giving those talks. And that's where #legal was really born, was out of that talk and that conversation and understanding that there was a lot of business owners that just didn't feel well represented by lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I imagine that going out on your own could have been a risk. And if so, how did you manage it?
Oh my gosh, it was terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge risk. It was a risk for a number of reasons. I had a child, my first son, and then I had gone back to my full-time job and realized that as an attorney, it was, for me, in the role that I was in, impossible for me to be both mom and lawyer. And I felt like I had to choose, and I felt really resentful to that. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to make that choice. I thought I want to be able to do both.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what drove me. It was over and above the fear or what am I going to do for money or all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So the driver for me was wanting to be able to have both a career and be a mom.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I think when you say that is how, in some ways, you've kind of been someone who's already always, I'm going to say, bucked the system, but with parentheses, and sort of made things that was good for you that maybe wasn't a traditional role as an attorney or even as choosing mom versus being a full-time or being a full-time attorney. Tell me a little bit about that. Would you consider yourself someone who hasn't always fit in? And has this ever been difficult? If so, and what did you do to overcome maybe that?
Oh, yes. 100%, I believe the reason why I struggled so much in law firm life. And it wasn't an external struggle. If you would have asked anyone that worked with me, they would have thought I liked what I did and I fit in great. And frankly, the partnership of the law firm when I left was shocked that I was leaving.
Mm-hmm.
But I was unable to be true to myself. I essentially had to dress a certain way, talk a certain way, look a certain way that really just wasn't who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt this extreme frustration that anytime I would buck that system a little bit, and it sounds so silly, something as silly as, what you're wearing or how you look was so important. And so much emphasis was placed on it, particularly as a woman, that anytime I would push that envelope, there would be blowback and I would feel uncomfortable or it would be pointed out. At one law firm I worked at, I had my natural hair color is brown, but I like to make it many, many different colors. And at one point in time, I just missed having my multicolored hair and I dyed my hair red.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not that bright. So let's be real. I can't tell you the number of male partners who commented on it. And then I had one who was he literally ran the firm. This was a very large firm. He referred to me as the girl with the red hair. And not by name. There was no name. He would yell to his secretary, get me the girl with the red hair. It was so just demoralizing. He certainly wasn't calling any of my male counterparts by how they looked or their, and so I felt like anytime I stepped out of that box, it was instantly attention gathering and it was just not the type of attention I wanted. I wanted to be known for the great work that I did or, some good argument I made.
So, the podcast that we're doing together is also for these young, ambitious women like you once were, still are, probably, about how some of the difficulties they have. Did it take courage to step outside the box, or you've always been an outside the box girl? Woman?
I think I've always been an outside the box kind of girl, but I still think it takes a lot of courage to do something different. When I left practice law firm life, I was told, I want to say more times than I can count, that the type of law firm I wanted to create and the type of law practice that I wanted to be in could not exist and was not viable from just a business monetary perspective. It couldn't be profitable. I was told that multiple times, that I was mistaken and that you couldn't have a virtual law firm. You couldn't have flexible workforce. It's just not the way the legal profession works. And I was terrified because of that. And I was, to be told over and over by people who you look at as very successful in the business, I kept thinking maybe they know something I don't know, but it just felt so wrong to me that I just felt like I had to try.
So you weren't fearful of failing. You said, I have to try.
I mean, I certainly was. I definitely fight against fear of failure for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten a lot better about it through a lot of my own internal work. But I don't ever let it stop me trying. So even if I'm having a very painful internal monologue,
Right, right.
I'm always going to do it no matter what, because I don't ever want to let the fear of failure stop me from doing anything, even if I have a whole bunch of emotions attached to it.
And if you can kind of like do action steps of how are you able to not get hooked into thinking about the fear of failure?
I think I say it out loud. For me, a lot of times when I get caught on something internally, or I have a fear, or I feel like things aren't going right, finding a really good, either trusted friend or someone in a mastermind, someone very close who may not have the emotional connection to it. I often find that if I sort of do that, like
Really helpful.
verbal brain dump,
Mm-hmm. For sure, for
I don't
sure.
know if you've ever seen the show Scrubs, but there's a character, Elliot, who does these like verbal sort of, she just starts talking and can't stop. That's me.
Right.
Uh,
But she
it,
feels a lot better afterwards.
that's what it is. It takes the wind out of the sails, because sometimes when I'm talking, I'm even saying to myself, this is crazy that you're
Yeah,
saying out loud.
yeah.
So not letting it stay internal is a big key to me being able to overcome some of those stumbling blocks.
You told me a few years ago your business partner decided to leave the firm, and you described it as having been an easy and amicable situation. Yet, you also talked about how her departure triggered this deep fear that somehow, without her, your firm might fail. How did you manage this?
Oh my gosh.
Oh
Do you
my
know
God.
what actually really got me through on that was my staff. Knowing that my staff stayed with me when she decided to leave, and they stood by me, and I knew that I wanted to keep going, to keep building what it is I wanted to do. That really helped motivate me to keep pushing forward and move past that fear. Because I wanted them to be able to continue to work in the space that we had created. And I wanted to as well. So it was hard, but I really took some external motivators there to push through some of that fear.
Can you talk a little bit about which external motivators you chose?
Yeah, my staff for sure. Just knowing they relied on me. I mean, I feel every single day, and 2020 has been a really big test in this, because the women that work for me, they rely on me to get their paychecks and have their health insurance and all the things that we provide. And to knowing that that is there, that's such a huge motivator for me, because I feel a sense of like loyalty to them,
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to continue to grow and to have this environment for them. And so I sort of focused on, they need me, and the clients, they need me. And so we just have to sort of push forward and continue and not let any of those fears stop that upward progress.
Mm-hmm. Being all virtual, have you been all virtual even during 2020 or before, or also before?
Yeah. So interestingly, I rented office space in February of 2020. The irony of 2020. So my staff is all virtual, even with this office space. It was frankly more for me than anything to get out of working from my home office.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out to be the greatest blessing, having rented this space in February.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, they have been virtual the entire time. They continue to do so. Pre-pandemic, we would have a yearly retreat where we would travel to a different part of the country, because they're all over the place. They're not just locally in the New York area where I sit. So we would do a yearly retreat. We do monthly Zoom calls. We are in Slack. We communicate all the time, but not in person, which certainly can change the method and mode of communication.
But you work on staying connected as best as possible, it sounds like.
Oh,
So
yeah, for
they
sure.
can rely on you, you can rely on them.
Yes, we have an unbelievable. I have some of the most brilliant and amazing women working for me.